From the moment I was born, I knew I deserved the best in my modest adoptive family. They called it princess syndrome. My adoptive mother saved for months to buy a silk blouse, then locked it away. I'd wear it secretly under my uniform. When caught, I'd lose dinner, so I'd find her hidden snacks and eat them all. My adoptive father claimed he couldn't afford tutoring, yet kept expensive liquor and cigarettes. I took some and sold them to the corner store owner. With the money, I enrolled in the best prep course and bought imported stationery. Once my grandmother had 2 chicken drumsticks for her biological grandson at the table. I calmly took both for myself. I study the hardest, I said. I need the nutrition. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a princess without the pedigree. I never argued. Then, on my 18th birthday, a black Maybach arrived outside our old apartment. My real parents, the wealthy Sterlings, had found me. Watching the shock and fear on my adoptive family's faces, I felt completely calm. It wasn't princess syndrome. I was a real princess all along. Sliding into the back of the Maybach, I felt no unease. Seated next to me was the girl the Sterling family had raised for 18 years as their own.
Annabelle.
You must be Vivian, she said, her voice soft. It must have been so difficult for you all these years. She took my hand. Hers was soft and delicate. Mine had a thin layer of calluses from years of writing. I didn't answer her question about difficulty. Instead, I gently pulled my hand away and traced the edge of the window frame. This car is due for a service, I said calmly. The driver's hands twitched on the wheel, and the car swerved almost imperceptibly. My mother, Eleanor, turned from the front seat to look at me, her eyes wide with surprise. Annabelle's smile froze. What did you say, Vivian?
I said.
This car is due for a service, I repeated. I pointed to an air vent. The air filter needs changing too. I can smell fine dust in the air. A dead silence fell over the car. My father, Richard Sterling, sitting in the passenger seat, looked at me properly for the first time in the rearview mirror. His eyes were sharp as a hawk, filled with scrutiny and intrigue. Annabelle's face cycled through shades of pink and white. She had likely expected a country mouse, either timid and stuttering or gaudy and materialistic. She had a whole script of condescending comforts prepared. I had just rendered it all useless with one quiet observation. She forced a laugh. You know so much, Vivian. Unlike me, I just know how to ride in a car. That's all right. Can learn, I replied, looking her directly in the eye. My tone was sincere. After all, representing the Sterling family is a heavy responsibility. A basic understanding of luxury goods is essential. You can't just recognize a brand name. That's how people mistake you for new money. Choked chuckle escaped the driver. A sharp glare from Richard in the mirror silenced him. Instantly, Annabelle's smile completely vanished. My mother, Eleanor, finally spoke, her voice laced with a complex emotion. Vivian, dear, how do you know all this? You want to know something? There are always ways to find out, I answered, my tone light.
I didn't tell them that.
With the money from my adoptive father's secret stash, a small portion that wasn't spent on tutoring went to buying every fashion, automotive, and financial magazine I could get my hands on. The Sterling mansion was perched atop Silvercrest Peak, a breathtaking display of wealth and power. The butler and a line of staff were already waiting at the entrance. Welcome home, Miss Sterling, they chorused, accepted their greeting without flinching. Behind me, Annabelle's nails were digging so hard into her palms. They nearly drew blood. For 18 years that title had been hers. The welcome home dinner was a lavish affair. Eleanor led me into a walk-in closet, with 3 walls lined with haute couture gowns and designer bags. Vivian, this is all for you.
Pick whatever you like.
Annabelle followed us in. Mother, she said sweetly, Vivian just got here. She might not be used to such formal clothes. I have some simple dresses in my closet. Perhaps she'd like to try one of those first. She reached for my arm. I sidestepped her touch, my gaze sweeping over the magnificent gowns. From a corner, I pulled out a simple, elegant white dress. This one? I said. Eleanor paused. But, Vivian, that's so plain. It was meant for everyday wear. It's fine. I prefer simple. A flicker of triumph crossed Annabelle's eyes. Yes, Mother. Whatever makes Vivian happy. Simple is more approachable anyway. I met her fake smile with a cold one of my own. The ballroom was a galaxy of shimmering lights and expensive perfume. I stood by Richard and Eleanor's side in my simple white dress. Annabelle, in a frothy pink Dior gown, moved like a proud peacock among her flock of friends. It wasn't long before they descended upon me. The leader of the pack, a girl named Mina, was Annabelle's chief sycophant. He looked me up and down with an exaggerated laugh. Annabelle, is this really your long-lost sister from the countryside? She looks so quaint. The others giggled. their laughter dripping with unconcealed superiority. Annabelle feigned annoyance.
Mina.
Don't be rude. This is my sister. Then she turned to me, her face a mask of apology. Vivian, don't mind her. She just says whatever she thinks. Before I could reply, another girl chimed in. Annabelle, you're just too nice. Oh, Vivian, where did you live before? Was it like one of those places they do fundraisers for on TV? The laughter grew louder. I saw my father, Richard, across the room, deep in conversation with several business tycoons. He glanced over, a slight frown on his face, but made no move to intervene. He was testing me. I took a deep breath and smiled, a warm, harmless expression. Yes, the place I grew up was small and run down. Nothing like this. I admitted it freely, my voice quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. The smirks on their faces widened. Then I changed my tone. But because of that, I learned to appreciate things, unlike some people who are born in Rome, but treat it like their personal playground, squandering everything without a second thought. My gaze rested gently on Annabelle. Her smile froze. Mina's face darkened. What's that supposed to mean?
Who are you talking about?
I'm not talking about anyone, I said, still smiling. I'm just stating facts. For instance, I know my father is in talks with Mr. Lin of Lin Corp, a project vital to Sterling Group's next 5 years. I also know that Mr. Davies' company stock has been unstable, and he's in desperate need of a capital injection. And I know that Mr. Coulson, I gestured to a young man in their group, lost an 8-figure sum in Macau last month, and still hasn't told his family. My voice was calm, but with each sentence the air grew colder. The cold airspace turned sheet white. Mina and her friends were no longer laughing. They stared at me as if I were some kind of monster.
Before I arrived, I
had spent the afternoon with the butler, memorizing the portfolio he had prepared. On every single guest attending that night, I walked over to the utterly stunned Annabelle and with a small smile, straightened a crease in her gown. Sister, thank you for this lovely party. But as daughters of the Sterling family, our words and actions reflect on our name. Joking with friends is one thing, but if a few harmless jokes were to jeopardize father's business deals, or worse, expose a friend's private struggles, that wouldn't be very wise, would it? After all, I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, we can't just wear the pretty dresses the family provides, without doing anything to benefit the family, can we? My words were soft, but they landed like a slap across her face. She wanted to make a fool of me, so I showed everyone who the real fool was. The one who knew nothing but parties and pleasure, contributing nothing to the family that gave her everything. The mood of the party shifted. The group that had been mocking me now watched me with a new expression, a mixture of fear and curiosity. Richard Sterling walked toward me, a glass of wine in his hand. He studied me for a long moment, then addressed the nearby guests. Everyone, this is my daughter Vivian. She's just returned home and is still learning the ropes. Please excuse her if she seems a bit rough around the edges. His words were apologetic, but his face held no apology at all. In fact, there was a glimmer of pride in his eyes. I knew I had passed the first test. Annabelle's face was a storm of emotions. She forced a smile and linked her arm through mine, a picture of sisterly affection. Yes, my sister is a quick learner. I'm sure the two of us will be a great help to father in the future. I smiled and let her cling to me. The game had just begun. Halfway through the party, it was time to cut the cake. A massive 3-tiered creation was wheeled out. Richard gave a short speech, welcoming me home, thanking the guests, the usual pleasantries. Then he handed me the cake knife. Vivian, you cut the first slice. As I reached for it, under the watchful eyes of every guest, Annabelle suddenly cried out, "Oh!" She stumbled as if losing her balance, and the full glass of champagne in her hand flew directly at me. The champagne hit me like a slap. Cold liquid soaked into the chest of my simple white dress, instantly turning the fabric translucent and clinging to my skin. Droplets splattered onto the pristine white icing of the 3-tiered cake. The ballroom went silent. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Oh no! Annabelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in a theatrical display of horror. Vivian, I am so clumsy. I tripped on. I don't know what I tripped on. Let me help you. She reached out with a napkin, intending to dab at my chest, a move designed to make me look pathetic, a wet dog being dried by its master. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I simply caught her wrist. My grip was iron. The calluses on my fingers, earned from years of frantic scribbling and carrying crates for the corner store, dug into her soft, manicured skin. Her eyes widened, the oops expression faltering into genuine pain. Don't, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried like a gunshot. I released her hand, and looked down at my dress. The amber stain was spreading, ruining the minimalist aesthetic I had curated. I looked up at Richard. He was watching, his face unreadable, his wine glass paused halfway to his lips. He was waiting to see if I would cry, scream, or run away to change. I did none of those things. Vintage Dom Perignon, 2008. I noted calmly, looking at the empty glass in Annabelle's hand. Approximately $400 a bottle. You've just wasted a glass, ruined a $1,200 dress, and risked contaminating the centerpiece cake. I turned to the guests, smoothing the wet fabric over my torso as if it were armor. In business, I addressed the room. Spilled milk is a cliché, but spilled champagne is a liquidity issue. A low chuckle rippled through the older businessmen. Richard's lips twitched upward. I picked up the silver cake knife. Fortunately, the cake remains mostly intact. Just like the sterling reputation, it takes more than one slip-up to ruin the foundation. I sliced the cake with surgical precision, ignoring the cold, sticky alcohol seeping into my skin. I placed the first slice on a china plate and handed it to Annabelle. "Eat, sister," I said, offering her the plate with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Sugar is good for shock. You look pale." Annabelle took the plate, her hands trembling. She had tried to humiliate me by making me a wet mess. Instead, I had turned her into a clumsy liability and myself into the stoic face of the company. Later that night, as I wiped the makeup from my face in my new, cavernous bathroom, there was a knock on the door. It was Richard. He didn't ask if I was okay. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at my reflection in the mirror. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., he said. "The driver will take you and Annabelle to headquarters. If you want to be a Sterling, you don't just wear the name. You earn it." "I know," I replied, not turning around. "I already read the quarterly reports you left on your desk." "Good. Then you know the West Coast Logistics Division is bleeding money. Annabelle has been overseeing the PR for it. I'm putting you in operations. Sink or swim. Eat or be eaten, Vivian." The Sterling Group headquarters was a monolith of glass and steel piercing the city skyline. Annabelle walked in like she owned the building, waving to receptionists who offered terrified smiles in return. I walked in like I was appraising the building for demolition. We were led to the boardroom. Richard sat at the head. "The West Coast Division," Richard began without preamble. "It's failing. Annabelle, your PR campaigns are expensive and yielding no ROI. Vivian, you have 1 month to find the leak in operations. Whoever fixes their department stays. The other gets a generous allowance and is removed from all company decisions." It was a death match. Annabelle smirked. She had the connections. She knew the managers. I was the new girl. "I'll work from the executive suite on the 40th floor, Annabelle announced, flipping her hair. "I need a creative environment." "I'll work from the basement," I said. Annabelle laughed. "The basement? That's where the archive and janitorial staff are." "That's where the records are," I corrected. "And that's where the rats live." For 3 weeks, I barely saw the sun. I didn't act like a princess. I acted like a forensic accountant on a warpath. I went through shipping manifests, fuel receipts, and overtime logs. My princess syndrome had taught me one thing: I deserved the best, and anyone stealing from me was committing a cardinal sin. The discrepancy was subtle. Fuel surcharges on trucking routes that didn't exist. It was a skimming operation, siphoning off $3 million a year. And the signature authorizing the third-party logistics provider? Sterling. Annabelle wasn't the mastermind. She wasn't smart enough. But she was lazy. She had been blindly signing invoices put in front of her by the director of logistics, a man named Marcus Thorne, in exchange for him covering up her missed deadlines and lavish personal expenses charged to the company card. I didn't go to Richard immediately. That's what a tattletale does. A Sterling leverages. I called Marcus Thorne to the basement. He was a heavy-set man in an ill-fitting suit, sweating as he looked around the stacks of dusty boxes. "Miss Vivian," he said, wiping his forehead. "You wanted to see me? The air conditioning down here is terrible." "It is," I agreed, sitting on a stack of files. "But the cell reception is fine." I held up my phone. "I have a draft email here addressed to Richard Sterling. It contains 42 PDF attachments detailing the phantom trucks you've been billing for." Thorne went pale. "Now listen, I can explain." "I don't care." I cut him off. "I don't care about the money. $3 million is a rounding error to my father. What I care about is the signature." I tossed a photocopy of an invoice at his feet. Annabelle's loopy, childish signature was at the bottom. "She didn't know," Thorne stammered. "She just signs what I give her." "I know. That's why she's useless. But she's also my sister." I stood up and walked toward him. "You're going to resign, citing health reasons. Before you go, you'll sign a confession stating that you manipulated the paperwork and that Annabelle caught you. You'll give her the credit for discovering your fraud." Thorne blinked, confused. You want me to say she caught me? But if you do, I won't press charges. You walk away with your pension. If you don't, I send this email, you go to prison, and I ensure you never work in this hemisphere again.
He signed.
Why give the win to Annabelle? Because a princess plays the long game. At the end of the month, in the boardroom, Richard looked at the report. Thorne resigned, Richard said, eyeing Annabelle. And he claims you found the discrepancies, Annabelle? Annabelle looked at me, confusion warring with relief. She knew she hadn't found anything. She knew I had her cornered, but she couldn't admit it without revealing her incompetence. Yes, father, she lied, her voice shaky. I noticed the numbers didn't add up. Good, Richard said. But Vivian turned in a restructuring plan for the entire logistics route that saves us an additional 15% annually. Annabelle, you stopped the bleeding. Vivian, you improved the patient. He looked at me with a terrifying intensity. Why did you let her take credit for the fraud discovery, Vivian? I met his gaze. Because a scandal involving a sterling daughter colluding with a thief would tank our stock price by 4%. I protected the asset. Operations are efficient now. That is all that matters. Richard leaned back, a rare, genuine smile forming. Ruthless. Pragmatic. Good. Annabelle glared at me across the table. She realized then that I hadn't just beaten her. I had owned her. She was in my debt, and she hated it. Desperation makes people sloppy. Annabelle couldn't beat me in business, so she went for the throat, my past. It was the week of the Sterling Foundation Gala, the social event of the season. I was in the library, reading up on the guest list, senators, oil tycoons, old money, when the butler announced visitors. For you, Miss Vivian. They say they are family. I walked into the foyer to see my adoptive parents. My adoptive mother, Sarah, was wearing the silk blouse I had bought with my own money years ago, the one she had locked away. It was stained and tight on her now. My adoptive father, Bob, smelled of cheap tobacco and nervous sweat. And standing behind them, smiling like a Cheshire cat, was Annabelle. Vivian, Sarah cried out, rushing forward with open arms. Oh, look at you. So fancy. You forgot about us so quickly? I stepped back, avoiding her touch. What are you doing here? Annabelle invited us, Bob grunted, eyeing the chandelier with greed. Said you missed us. Said you wanted to share your good fortune. Annabelle stepped forward, feigning sweetness. I just thought it was so sad, Vivian. You talk about your past so coldly. I wanted to reunite you. I'm sure father would love to meet the people who raised you. She wanted a scene. She wanted them to be boorish, greedy, and embarrassing in front of the staff and, inevitably, Richard. She wanted to prove I came from trash. How much? I asked. The room went quiet. Vivian, Sarah gasped. We're here for love. I know Bob lost his job at the plant 6 months ago, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I know you have a gambling debt of $12,000. I know Annabelle paid for your cab here. So I will ask again. How much did she pay you to come here and act like affectionate parents? Bob's eyes narrowed. $5,000. I'll give you $50,000, I said. Annabelle's jaw dropped. Vivian, you can't. Quiet, I snapped. I turned to the butler. Bring my checkbook. I wrote the check rapidly. I tore it out and held it between 2 fingers.
$52,000.
But here are the conditions. You take this money, you leave the city, and you never contact me or the Sterlings again. If you speak to the press, I will sue you for the money back plus emotional damages. I have the best lawyers in the country on retainer. Do we have a deal? Bob snatched the check. Pleasure doing business, Viv. Wait, Annabelle screeched. You're just going to leave? I paid you to. She paid better, Bob shrugged. They turned and walked out the door without looking back. I turned to Annabelle. She was red-faced, furious. You think money solves everything, she hissed. In our world? Yes. I took a step closer to her. You tried to weaponize my trauma, Annabelle. But you forgot one thing.
I don't care about them.
They were just landlords I outgrew. You're the one who cares about appearances. Richard had been standing at the top of the stairs the whole time. He began to clap, a slow, rhythmic sound. Annabelle, Richard called down. That was a pathetic investment. You spent $5,000 for zero return. Vivian spent $50,000 to permanently remove a liability. Learn the difference. Annabelle fled the room in tears. The climax arrived 3 months later at the shareholders' annual meeting. This wasn't just a party. This was where the board voted on the future CEO succession plan. Richard had announced he would be stepping back in 5 years. He wanted to name a successor to groom. It was between me and Annabelle. Annabelle had brought in a heavy hitter. She was engaged. Julian Thorne, no relation to the fired logistics manager, was the heir to Thorne Heavy Industries. A merger between Sterling and Thorne would create a monopoly. Annabelle flaunted the engagement ring, a rock the size of a grape, as her trump card. Father can't deny the merger, she whispered to me as we sat on the stage before the shareholders. I bring an empire to the table. You just bring spreadsheets. Julian sat in the front row, looking bored. He was handsome, shark-like, and known for being as ruthless as Richard. The presentation began. Annabelle presented her vision: expansion through acquisition, using Julian's money. It was flashy, shallow, and the board loved it. Then it was my turn. I stood at the podium. I wore a black suit, sharp and severe. Mergers are powerful, I began, my voice amplified through the auditorium. But independence is sovereignty. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me changed. It wasn't a graph. It was a video. It was grainy footage from a casino in Macau. It showed Julian Thorne. But he wasn't gambling. He was handing a briefcase to a man known to be a competitor of the Sterling Group, Mr. Lin. The crowd murmured. Julian sat up straight, his boredom vanishing. My sister proposes a merger with Thorne Industries, I continued. But my due diligence revealed that Thorne Industries is leveraged to the hilt. They're bankrupt in all but name. Mr. Thorne is selling proprietary tech to our competitors to stay afloat. A merger wouldn't strengthen us. It would anchor us to a sinking ship. I clicked again. Financial documents appeared. Furthermore, Annabelle knew this. The room gasped. Annabelle stood up, knocking over her chair. That's a lie. Is it? I pointed to an email chain on the screen. Here is the correspondence. Annabelle agreed to use the Sterling capital to bail out Thorne Industries in exchange for the marriage proposal. She was selling out this company to buy herself a husband. I looked at Richard. His face was dark as thunder. She is not a Sterling, I said, my voice ringing with finality. A Sterling builds the empire. She sold it for a diamond ring. The shareholders erupted. Julian Thorne stood up and stormed out, followed by his lawyers. Annabelle stood alone on the stage, stripped of her fiancé, her plan, and her dignity. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. You ruined everything. You're a monster. You're just a stray dog we took in. I am the daughter who saved this company, I replied calmly. You are the one who tried to bankrupt it. Richard stood up. He walked to the podium. He placed a hand on my shoulder. The board will vote, Richard said. But my vote goes to Vivian. Annabelle was sent to Europe. Art school, the press release said. In reality, she was exiled with a monthly stipend that was generous to a normal person but poverty to a princess. I sat in Richard's office, my office now. The view from the top of the Sterling Tower was breathtaking. The city looked like a circuit board, humming with energy and money. The princess syndrome they had mocked me for? It was never a syndrome. It was an instinct. I knew I belonged here, not because of blood, but because I had the will to survive the altitude. I picked up my pen, a Montblanc, paid for by the company, not stolen cigarettes, and signed the acquisition papers for Lin Corp. My phone buzzed. A text from Annabelle. I hate you. I didn't reply. I deleted the number. I had work to do.